Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. From a young age, Dahmer exhibited signs of emotional detachment and a lack of interest in social interactions. His fascination with dead animals began early. He would collect roadkill and dissect the carcasses, showing a morbid curiosity about anatomy. His parents' marriage was troubled, filled with frequent arguments, and his mother's mental health issues added to the household instability. When his parents divorced in 1978, Dahmer felt abandoned and his behavior grew increasingly erratic. In June 1978, shortly after graduating from high school, Dahmer committed his first murder. He picked up Stephen Hicks, an 18-year-old hitchhiker, by offering him a ride, drinks, and companionship. Dahmer lured Hicks to his family home, where they drank beer and talked. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer struck him on the head with a dumbbell and then strangled him to death. He dismembered the body and buried the remains in the backyard. Dahmer later pulverized the bones and scattered them in the woods behind his house. This first murder set the stage for his later gruesome activities. After his first murder, Dahmer attended Ohio State University briefly, but dropped out due to poor grades and alcohol abuse. He then enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he served as a medic in Germany. However, his alcoholism persisted, leading to his discharge in 1981. Returning to Ohio and later to Milwaukee, Dahmer lived with his grandmother, who was unaware of his dark urges. In 1987, Dahmer resumed his killing spree. This period marked an escalation in the brutality of his crimes. Stephen Twomey, 1987. Dahmer met Stephen Twomey at a bar and took him to a hotel room, where he murdered him, though Dahmer later claimed to have no memory of the act. He dismembered Twomey's body and transported the remains to his grandmother's house, where he further disposed of them. James Dockstader, 1988. James Dockstader, a 14-year-old boy, was lured to Dahmer's apartment with the promise of money for posing nude. Dahmer strangled him and dismembered his body, disposing of the remains in the trash. Richard Guerrero, 1988. Dahmer met Richard Guerrero, 22, outside a bar and offered him money to come to his grandmother's house. There, Dahmer drugged, strangled, and dismembered Guerrero. Anthony Sears, 1989. Anthony Sears, a 24-year-old aspiring model, was lured to Dahmer's grandmother's house, where he was drugged and killed. Dahmer kept Sears' skull and genitals as souvenirs, which he stored in his work locker. Dahmer's killing spree intensified in the early 1990s, with his methods becoming more horrific. He began consuming parts of his victims and attempted to create as zombies by drilling holes into their skulls and injecting acid or boiling water into their brains. Raymond Smith, 1990. Raymond Smith, also known as Ricky Beeks, was lured to Dahmer's apartment, drugged, and strangled. Dahmer took Polaroid photos of Smith's dismemberment and kept his skull. Edward Smith, 1990. Edward Smith was another victim whom Dahmer killed and dismembered. Dahmer attempted to preserve Smith's skeleton by using various chemicals, but this attempt failed. Ernest Miller, 1990. Ernest Miller was killed in a similar manner to Dahmer's other victims, but Dahmer consumed parts of his body, including his biceps, and kept the skeleton as a souvenir. David Thomas, 1990. David Thomas was killed, and Dahmer took photographs of the dismemberment process. He did not preserve any parts of Thomas's body. Curtis Straughter, 1991. Curtis Straughter, a 17-year-old, was lured to Dahmer's apartment, drugged, and strangled. Dahmer dismembered his body and kept his skull. Errol Lindsey, 1991. Errol Lindsey was the first victim in whom Dahmer attempted his zombie experiment. Dahmer drilled a hole into Lindsey's skull and injected acid into his brain. The experiment failed, and Lindsey was strangled and dismembered. Tony Hughes, 1991. Tony Hughes was a deaf and mute man whom Dahmer lured to his apartment and killed. Dahmer kept his skull. Konarak Synthesumphone, 1991. Konarak Synthesumphone, a 14-year-old boy, managed to escape Dahmer's apartment and was found by two women who called the police. However, when the police arrived, Dahmer convinced them that Konarak was his boyfriend and that they had a domestic dispute. The police, believing Dahmer, returned Konarak to his apartment, where Dahmer killed him shortly after. Dahmer continued his killing spree with several more victims in 1991. Matt Turner, killed and dismembered in June 1991. Jeremiah Weinberger, killed in July 1991 after spending a weekend with Dahmer. Oliver Lacey, killed in July 1991. Dahmer kept Lacey's heart and head in his refrigerator. Joseph Braidhoft, Dahmer's last victim, killed in July 1991 and dismembered. Dahmer's killing spree came to an end on July 22, 1991, when Tracy Edwards, a potential victim, managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment and flagged down two police officers. When the officers entered Dahmer's apartment, they discovered photographs of dismembered bodies and human remains, including severed heads and a heart in the refrigerator. The crime scene was filled with the stench of decomposition and provided a chilling glimpse into Dahmer's gruesome activities. Upon his arrest, Dahmer readily confessed to the murders and provided detailed accounts of his crimes. His trial began in January 1992. Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder, hoping for a verdict of insanity that might mitigate his punishment. However, the jury found him sane and guilty, sentencing him to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, amounting to 957 years without the possibility of parole. Dahmer was initially kept in solitary confinement for his own safety, but was later transferred to a less secure unit at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was attacked by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver while performing work duties. Scarver bludgeoned Dahmer to death with a metal bar from the prison weight room. Dahmer died shortly after the attack from his injuries. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes left an indelible mark on society, prompting extensive media coverage and public fascination. His case raised numerous questions about police procedures, the criminal justice system, and the handling of mental illness. The gruesome details of his murders have inspired books, documentaries, films, and numerous studies into the psychology of serial killers, cementing Dahmer's place as one of the most infamous figures in criminal history. The horrors of his actions and the failures that allowed him to continue his killing spree remain a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity.